She signed the divorce papers with a steady hand, not because she was strong, because she had already cried every tear she had the night before. Marcus didn't even look up from his phone. "You'll be fine," he said, like she was a minor inconvenience he was finally closing out. Clara Whitfield walked out of that office with nothing. No house, no savings, no name worth keeping. But somewhere across the city, a man she had never met was about to make one decision that would change everything. If this story already has your heart, subscribe to this channel, follow every part until the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The coffee was cold by the time Clara remembered it was there. She sat at the corner table of a diner she had never been to, before a place 3 neighborhoods away from the life she used to know, and stared at the paper cup like it might tell her what to do next. 6 hours ago, she had been Clara Whitfield, wife of Marcus Whitfield, vice president of Whitfield Financial Group. Now she was just Clara. Clara with 2 suitcases. Clara with $43 in her account. Clara, who had just discovered that the joint savings account, the one she had contributed to for 9 years, had been quietly drained over the past 14 months. She had not known. That was the part that kept hitting her. Not the betrayal, not the divorce, not even the fact that Marcus had sat across from her this morning, with the expression of a man signing a routine document. It was the fact that she had not known. She had cooked dinner. She had attended his company parties. She had smiled beside him in photographs. And the entire time, he had been preparing to leave. Clara pressed her fingers against the edge of the table until her knuckles went white. She would not cry here. She had made that decision in the parking garage after the signing. No more crying in public. No more looking like a woman who had been destroyed. Because the truth was, Marcus had not destroyed her. He had simply made very clear what he thought she was worth. And she refused to agree with him. The door to the diner opened. A gust of November air cut through the warmth, and 3 men walked in. Clara barely noticed them. She was doing math in her head. $43, 2 suitcases, a phone with 4% battery, and a sister in Phoenix who already had 4 kids and no spare room. The men sat in the booth directly behind her. She heard the scrape of chairs. She heard low voices. She did not look up. "You understand what Mr. Voss expects," one of the men said. His voice was flat, professional. The kind of voice that had learned how to say dangerous things in ordinary tones. Clara's pen stopped moving. She had been making a list on a napkin. She did not breathe. "The transfer happens Thursday," the second voice said. "No delays. He doesn't tolerate delays." "And the witness?" the third man asked. A pause. "There won't be a witness." Clara stared at her coffee. Her hand had gone completely still. She understood with sudden and absolute clarity that she had heard something she was not supposed to hear. She understood this the way a person understands that a car is about to run a red light 1 second before impact, when there is no longer any time to move. She carefully, quietly picked up her phone. 4% battery. She opened the camera. Her hand was shaking. She told herself it was from the cold. She pressed record. She set the phone against her coffee cup. And she kept her eyes on her napkin, like she was still doing math. She left before they did. She paid with exact change. $3.75, for a cup of coffee she never drank, and she walked out without looking back. She made it half a block before her legs stopped working. She leaned against the brick wall of a dry cleaner that had already closed for the night, and she forced herself to breathe. What had she just heard? What had she just recorded? The rational part of her brain said, "Walk away, delete the video. This is not your problem." But another part of her, the part that had been sitting in that diner with $43 and no plan, feeling invisible for the first time in 9 years, that part said something different. "You have 2 choices right now, Clara. You can be the woman who walks away. Or you can be someone who finally does something that matters." She looked down at her phone. 3% battery now. She had maybe 1 phone call left. She did not know who to call. She did not know what she had recorded. She only knew 1 name connected to the name she had just heard. Everyone in this city knew the name Voss. Dominic Voss was not a rumor. He was not a newspaper headline. He was not the kind of story people told with excitement. He was the kind of story people told very quietly, in private, after checking that nobody was listening. The Voss family had been part of this city's architecture for 3 generations. Not the visible architecture, not the museums or the glass towers or the parks. The invisible architecture. The agreements that decided which construction contracts were won. The quiet conversations that determined which investigations went forward and which ones quietly disappeared. The understanding, never spoken, never written, that certain things in this city ran the way they ran because Dominic Voss permitted them to run that way. Clara had heard his name the way everyone heard his name. In passing, with a slight lowering of the voice. She had never thought about him the way she was thinking about him right now, standing in the cold with a phone that was dying, carrying a recording she didn't fully understand, with nowhere to go and nothing to lose. Nothing to lose. That thought was strangely clarifying. She did not go to the police. She thought about it. She stood on the corner for 6 minutes thinking about it. But the men in that diner had spoken about a witness with the calm certainty of people who knew exactly how to make problems disappear. If she walked into a police station, she did not know who was listening. She did not know who owed a favor to whom. She did not know this city the way she thought she knew this city because she had just spent 9 years not knowing the man sleeping beside her. So clearly her instincts about safety and trust needed significant revision. So she did something that was either the bravest or most reckless thing she had ever done. She looked up the address for Voss Industries. She walked there, and she asked to speak to Dominic Voss. Lobby of Voss Industries was the kind of space designed to make a person feel small. Marble floors, high ceilings, security guards who looked at her the way people look at something they need to remove. Clara walked up to the front desk and said, "My name is Clara Whitfield. I need to speak with Mr. Voss." The receptionist, a young woman, with the particular expression of someone trained to be politely dismissive, looked at her. "Do you have an appointment?" "No. Mr. Voss doesn't accept." "I have a recording," Clara said, "of a conversation I believe involves his business. I'll give it to the FBI if he doesn't want it." She said it quietly. She said it like she was asking about the weather. Because she had decided somewhere on that walk over that the only power she had right now was the power of someone who appeared to have nothing left to lose. And that, she had discovered, was a surprisingly large amount of power. The receptionist's expression did not change, but her hand moved to the phone on her desk. And 5 minutes later, Clara was in an elevator going to the 32nd floor. The office was large and mostly dark. The city spread out behind floor-to-ceiling windows like a map of everything Dominic Voss owned. He was standing with his back to her when she walked in. And for a moment, before he turned around, Clara had the strange thought that she should leave. That whatever she had walked into tonight was larger than she understood. That this man, whoever he was not someone who existed in the same ordinary world she had been living in this morning. Then he turned around. Dominic Voss was not what she expected. She had expected old. She had expected fat. She had expected the comfortable ugliness of a man who had never needed to impress anyone. Instead, he was somewhere in his early 40s, tall, the kind of controlled stillness that came from absolute certainty about every room he entered. Dark eyes that looked at her with the focused, almost clinical attention of a person deciding something. Not deciding whether she was attractive, deciding whether she was a problem. "Ms. Whitfield," he said, "yes. You mentioned a recording." "Yes, and you came here directly." He tilted his head slightly. "Not to the police. I thought about it," Clara said. "And I don't know who to trust." Something shifted in his expression. It was not a smile. It was more like the beginning of a decision being made. "Sit down," he said. She played the recording. He listened without expression. When it finished, he was quiet for exactly 11 seconds. She counted. "Do you know what you heard?" he asked. "Part of it. Do you know what it means?" "Enough," she said. "Someone is transferring something on Thursday, and they're making sure there's no witness to it. And you came to me. You were mentioned by name." Dominic looked at her for a long moment. "Ms. Whitfield," he said, "you walked into this building tonight with a recording that implicates people who would like very much for that recording not to exist." He paused. "Do you understand what that means for your safety?" "I'm starting to. Are you frightened?" Clara thought about this honestly. "This morning my husband of 9 years handed me divorce papers and told me I'd be fine," she said. "He emptied our savings account. I have $43 and nowhere to go." She looked at him directly. "I'm not very frightened of anything tonight." Dominic Voss was quiet for a moment. Then he said something she did not expect. "What do you need?" The question stopped her completely. Not "what do you want from me?" Not "what are you asking for?" "What do you need?" It was such a simple question. It was the question nobody had asked her today. Not Marcus. Not the attorney. Not the sister she had called who let it go to voicemail. Clara opened her mouth, closed it, and to her absolute horror she felt her eyes fill. She blinked hard, twice, and then she made herself speak before the tears decided to fall. "I need somewhere safe to stay tonight," she said. "And I need to know that the people in that recording can't find me." Dominic nodded once. "Both of those are manageable," he said. And in return, he looked at her steadily. "You don't give that recording to anyone until I've had time to determine what it is." "How much time?" 48 hours. "And if I don't agree?" "Then you walk out of this building with a recording you don't fully understand," he said, "and you hope the wrong people don't notice you leaving." Clara looked at him. He was not threatening her. That was the strange part. His voice held no edge, no menace, no pressure. He was simply telling her the truth, the way a person describes the weather, not because they control it, but because they know it well enough to be accurate about it. 48 hours, she said. "Yes, and I keep the original." Something crossed his face that might, in different light, have been respect. "Yes," he said. "They put her in a suite on the 28th floor of a building 3 blocks away. A woman named Serena, efficient, quiet, with the careful composure of someone who had seen stranger things than a woman arriving with 2 suitcases, and no explanation showed her the rooms. Clean clothes had appeared from somewhere. Food had appeared on the table. The window overlooked a courtyard with old trees. Clara sat on the edge of the bed and realized she had not eaten since 6 in the morning. She ate mechanically, staring at nothing. She thought about Marcus. She thought about what he would think if he could see her now in a suite owned by Dominic Voss, carrying a recording she didn't fully understand, having made a 48-hour agreement with one of the most dangerous men in the city. He would think she had lost her mind. He would probably be correct. But here was the other truth. She had spent 9 years being the careful one, the patient one, the one who kept the household running, who remembered every anniversary and every dietary preference and every colleague's name and every professional obligation Marcus had on his calendar. She had been excellent at being invisible in of someone else's life, and she had lost everything anyway. So maybe the answer was not to be more careful. Maybe the answer was to be something else entirely. The knock on the door came at 11:15. She opened it to find Dominic Voss standing in the hallway without the jacket, without the controlled boardroom stillness. He looked, for the first time, like a person who was thinking hard about something. "The recording," he said. The third voice, the one who asked about the witness. "Yes, I know who that is." Clara waited. "He works for me." The silence that followed was the kind that changes the shape of a room. "Someone inside your organization," she said. "Yes. Someone you trusted." Dominic looked at her with those dark, steady eyes. "Someone I made that mistake with," he said carefully. Yes, Clara thought about 9 years with Marcus, about discovering in the last 24 hours the architecture of a betrayal built so slowly and so deliberately that she had never seen it coming. "I know how that feels," she said, and she meant it completely. He was quiet for a moment. "Miss Whitfield," he said, "what did you do before today?" "I was a financial analyst." She paused. "For my husband's company. Unpaid. Because we agreed when we got married that his career was the priority and I would support it." Something shifted in his expression. Something that was not pity. She would have hated pity. It was something closer to recognition. "You know how to read financial documents," he said. "I know how to read them better than most people who get paid to. Because you did it for free for 9 years.
Yes.
He looked at her for a long moment. "Get some rest," he said. "Mr. Voss," he paused. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't know me." "I walked in off the street." "You walked in off the street with a recording that could dismantle something I've spent years building," he said. "And instead of using it against me, you brought it to me. I could still use it against you." "You could," he agreed. "But you didn't." He started to turn. "That," he said, "is not something that happens often." She did not sleep easily. But somewhere after 2 in the morning, in a room that smelled like clean linen and security, she had no rational basis for, she fell into the deepest sleep she had had in months. She did not dream about Marcus. She dreamed about the recording, about the 3 voices in a diner behind her, about the word witness spoken in the casual tone of a man describing an obstacle that had already been planned around. When she woke at 6, the city outside the window was gray and starting. Her phone charged now. Someone had left a charger on the nightstand, had 2 missed calls, both from Marcus. She stared at his name for a long moment. Then she turned the phone face down and went to find coffee. She found Dominic Voss at a table near the window with a laptop open and 3 folders spread around him like evidence in a case. He did not look up when she walked in. "The coffee's fresh," he said. She poured a cup, stood at the edge of the table. He turned the laptop toward her. On the screen were financial documents transfers, dates, account numbers, a web of transactions that had been designed, clearly, to look like nothing. "Tell me what you see," he said. Clara set down her cup. She sat. She pulled the laptop toward her, and for the next 40 minutes, she forgot about Marcus. She forgot about the divorce. She forgot about the $43 and the 2 suitcases. She forgot about everything except the numbers in front of her, because numbers had always been the one place where she could think clearly, and these numbers were telling a very specific story to anyone who knew how to listen. "These 3 transfers," she said, tracing the screen with one finger. "They're disguised as vendor payments. But the timing is wrong. Legitimate vendor payments don't cluster like this." She paused. "And this account number," it repeats. 3 times across different transaction labels. Whoever set this up didn't think anyone would cross-reference. She looked up. Dominic Voss was watching her with an expression she could not read. "How long would it have taken your financial team to catch this?" she asked. "They didn't catch it," he said. "How long before you found it?" "I didn't find it," he said. "You did." Clara looked back at the screen. Outside, the city was waking up. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a thought was forming, quiet and stubborn and entirely unexpected. Maybe Marcus leaving was not the end of everything. Maybe Marcus leaving was the beginning of something she didn't have a name for yet. She did not say this out loud. She simply looked at the numbers. And she kept reading. At 9:15, her phone rang. Not Marcus this time, an unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then she thought about the men in the diner. About the word witness. She answered Miss Whitfield. The voice was unfamiliar. "Calm, very, very calm. You were in a diner last night. Corner booth. You left in a hurry." Clara's hand tightened on the phone. She looked across the table. Dominic had gone still. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Of course you do," the voice said. "We noticed the phone, Ms. Whitfield. We noticed everything." A pause. "Give us what you recorded and go back to your life. No one needs to know you were there." "I recorded nothing," she said. "Ms. Whitfield, I don't know who you are," she said. "I don't know what diner you're referring to. I suggest you stop calling this number." She hung up. Her hand was shaking, not from fear, from fury. Go back to your life, as if she had a life to go back to. As if there was something waiting for her that could be threatened. She set the phone on the table. Dominic reached over without asking and picked it up. He looked at the number. He typed something into his own phone. "They found you faster than I expected," he said. His voice was completely neutral. The way a surgeon's voice is neutral when describing something that requires immediate action. "Is that a problem?" Clara asked. He looked at her. "It means the 48 hours just became 24, he said. "Then we should stop talking," she said, "and start working." Something crossed his face, not surprise exactly, but something close to it. He turned his laptop back toward her. "Start with the second folder," he said. Clara opened it. And somewhere across the city, in the diner 3 neighborhoods away, 3 men were making a different kind of plan. But Clara Whitfield, who had arrived in this morning with nothing, who had left a marriage this morning with nothing, who had walked into a building on nothing but the stubborn refusal to be dismissed, was no longer the woman who could be quietly erased. She just didn't know it yet. The second folder contained 11 months of someone's very careful dishonesty. Clara could see it the way a doctor sees a fracture on an X-ray, not because it announces itself, but because the shape of it is wrong. The angle is wrong, the density is wrong, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. "This is not one person," she said. Dominic looked up from his phone. "What do you mean? The pattern changes." She tapped the 3rd page. Here, whoever was managing these transfers had a specific habit. They always rounded to the nearest 500. Clean numbers. Careful, controlled. She flipped forward 6 pages. But here, the numbers get messier. Odd amounts. Transfers at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. Someone else took over. Someone who was either less careful or more desperate. "Or both," Dominic said. "Or both," she agreed. "Which means you don't have a traitor. You have at least 2, and they may not even fully trust each other." The room was very quiet. Dominic stood slowly, walked to the window, and stood there with his hands in his pockets, looking at the city like he was recalculating something fundamental. Clara watched him. She had been watching him for the past 2 hours, And she had noticed things, the way his jaw tightened when something surprised him, and he didn't want it to show, the way he asked questions that already contained half the answer, the way he listened to her, with the focused, total attention of someone who had learned that underestimating people was an expensive mistake. He was not what she had expected. She still wasn't sure what to do with that. If there are two, he said, still facing the window, the second one is insurance. Insurance against what? He turned around. Against the first one deciding to cut a deal. Clara felt the weight of that settle across the table between them. So one of them has something on the other, she said. Yes, and the recording I made is the first one covering his position, Dominic said. Establishing a witness problem before a Thursday transfer that neither of them wants traced. But if I can identify the pattern shift, if I can find exactly where the second person entered these accounts, then we know which of them panicked first, Dominic said. And the one who panicked first is the one who'll talk, Clara finished. He looked at her across the table. She looked back at him. You're not what I expected, he said. You keep almost saying that and stopping yourself. I wasn't stopping myself, he said. I was deciding whether it was relevant. Is it? A beat. Not yet, he said, and went back to his phone. Clara pulled the folder closer and kept reading. At 10:45, a man named Roman walked in without knocking. He was broad, somewhere in his late 40s, with the particular bearing of someone who had spent decades being the most dangerous person in any given room and had stopped needing to prove it. He looked at Clara the way a person looks at an unexpected piece of furniture, not hostile, just recalibrating the space. She's still here, he said to Dominic. She found the second entry point, Dominic said. Roman looked at her again, differently this time. She's a civilian. She's also the only person in this building who caught what 12 people in my financial division missed in 11 months, Dominic said. So adjust accordingly. Roman pulled a chair out and sat without being invited. The number that called you this morning, he said to Clara. It's a burner, bought in cash 3 days ago at a convenience store, 4 blocks from the courthouse where your divorce was filed yesterday morning. Clara felt the air leave her lungs. They were watching the courthouse, she said. They were watching your husband, Marcus. Marcus Whitfield was approached 2 weeks ago, Roman said. We don't know by whom yet. We know the approach happened, and we know he didn't report it. Clara stared at him. You're saying Marcus was contacted by the same people whose conversation I recorded. We're saying it's probable. Why would they approach Marcus? Roman and Dominic exchanged a look. It was the kind of look that contains an entire conversation. Because Marcus Whitfield's company has been quietly acquiring data on Voss Industries for the past 8 months, Dominic said. Financial records, personal records. Records that should not have been accessible. Clara's voice came out very flat. He was gathering information on you. Yes, and the divorce filed yesterday, 3 days after the burner phone was purchased. Roman's voice held no warmth. Whether your husband understood what he was being used for, or whether he simply took money and asked no questions, we don't know yet. Clara sat very still. In the space of 20 seconds, the story of her marriage had just been rewritten entirely. She had thought Marcus left her because he fell out of love, because he found someone else, because 9 years of careful, invisible partnership had simply ceased to be interesting to him. The possibility that she had been removed quietly, cleanly, legally, because someone wanted her out of the way before they made a move on the man sitting across this table from her was so far outside anything she had prepared for that her brain simply stopped for a moment like a car engine cutting out mid-highway. Ms. Whitfield, Dominic said. His voice was steady. Not gentle, she didn't think gentleness was a language he was entirely fluent in, but steady, in the specific way of someone who knows that what you need in a certain moment is not comfort but ground. Yes, she said. Are you all right? No, she said honestly. But I'll finish what I started. Roman looked at her for a moment. Then he made a sound that was almost, but not quite, a laugh. She'll do, he said to Dominic. I know, Dominic said. By noon, Clara had mapped the full entry point of the second account handler. 14 months ago, someone had accessed the subsidiary accounts through a security clearance that belonged to a man named Vincent Hale Dominic's head of operations for the Eastern Division. The access had been brief, surgical, almost undetectable. 2 transactions, both small, both designed to look like rounding errors. But they had established a pathway, and 8 months later, someone had used that pathway to begin moving real money. Vincent Hale, Dominic said. His voice had gone completely quiet. Clara had learned in the past 6 hours that the quieter Dominic's voice became, the more dangerous the information it was delivering. "You know him," she said. "I've known him for 15 years. And the second person, the one who came in later, the one with the messier patterns." Dominic was quiet for a moment. "Show me the timestamps again," he said. She turned the folder toward him. He looked at the dates for a long moment. Then he leaned back in his chair, and the look on his face was not anger. It was something quieter than anger. Something that looked, for a brief, unguarded moment, like grief. "His name is Peter Crane," he said. "Who is he?" "He was my lawyer," Dominic said. "For 12 years. A pause. He handled everything private. Everything personal. He was the only person outside of Roman who knew the full structure of the holding companies." Clara said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Two men, 15 years and 12 years respectively. The kind of length of relationship where you stop checking, because you've already decided. Because the alternative that someone you trusted completely has been working against you in silence for over a year is too large and too ugly to seriously consider. She understood this at a cellular level. She understood it the way only someone who had spent 9 years not knowing could understand it. "I'm sorry," she said. Dominic looked at her. "Don't be," he said. "Be useful. Those aren't mutually exclusive." Something shifted in his expression. "No," he said quietly. "I suppose they're not." Her phone rang again at 12:40. Marcus. She looked at the name on the screen. She thought about the courthouse. She thought about the burner phone, perched 3 days before. She thought about 8 months of records, gathered in silence while she made dinner and attended company parties, and smiled in photographs. She answered, "Clara." His voice was the voice she knew, warm, confident, with the particular ease of a man who had never doubted his own reasonableness. "I've been trying to reach you. I know. Where are you? Are you at your sister's?" "Why does it matter?" A pause, brief, rehearsed. "Because I'm worried about you," he said. "Yesterday was hard. I know it was hard. I just want to know you're safe." "You want to know where I am," she said. "Clara." "Marcus." She kept her voice completely even. "Who paid you?" The silence that followed was different from any silence she had heard from him before. It was not the silence of confusion. It was not the silence of offense. It was the silence of a man calculating. And that calculation, that thin, terrible pause where a human response should have been told her everything Roman hadn't. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Okay," she said. "Clara." She hung up. She set the phone on the table. Her hands were completely steady. Dominic was watching her. "He was paid," she said. "Yes. To file for divorce now. To remove me from his life, his finances, his access records, to create clean separation before Thursday." Because I had access to his company's financial records, she felt the pieces move into their places with the cold, clarifying logic of a proof. Because if anyone could cross-reference what was being moved through his accounts, it was me. Because I built those cross-reference systems. I designed the audit protocols. She looked at Dominic. "They didn't divorce me because they wanted me gone. They divorced me because they were afraid of what I could find." "That is our current understanding," Dominic said. Clara let that sit for exactly 5 seconds. Then she pulled the folder back toward her. "Then they made a mistake," she said. "Because they thought removing you would neutralize you," Dominic said. "Because they didn't know that the only thing that was keeping me quiet," she said, "was having something to protect." She looked up. "I don't have anything left to protect anymore." Dominic Voss looked at her across the table and said nothing for a long moment. And then he said, "You do now." Roman came back at 2 in the afternoon, with 2 men Clara didn't recognize and a file that he set in the center of the table without ceremony. "The Thursday transfer," he said. "We have the destination account." Dominic opened the file. "Offshore, 3 layers. But the outermost layer traces to a holding company registered in the name of an LLC that shares a mailing address with Whitfield Financial Group." Clara's head came up sharply. "Marcus's company, yes. So they're not just using Marcus as a way to gather information," she said. "They're using his company as a transit point for the transfer." "Which means," Roman said, looking at her steadily, "that Marcus Whitfield is not a bystander who took money and looked the other way. He's a participant," she said, "a willing one or a cornered one. We're still determining which." Clara thought about 9 years. She thought about the voice on the phone this morning. Go back to your life, spoken with the calm certainty of someone who had already decided her life was a thing she could simply return to, unchanged, after everything. She thought about a man who had sat across from her at a signing table yesterday morning, and said, "You'll be fine," while already knowing what he had agreed to. "Does it matter?" she asked. Roman looked at her. "Legally," she said. "Cornered or willing, does the distinction protect him?" "No," Roman said. "Not at this level." "Then it doesn't matter," she said. "What matters is Thursday." Dominic turned to her. "What we need," he said carefully, "is someone who can be inside Whitfield Financial Systems before the transfer initiates, who knows the architecture well enough to trace the pathway in real time and interrupt it at the correct moment without triggering the backup protocols." Clara looked at him. "You need me inside Marcus's company," she said. "I need someone who built the system," Dominic said. "I built the system." She paused. "I built all of it. Every audit protocol, every transfer checkpoint, every backup failsafe." She met his eyes. "I built it for 9 years, and he never once thought to change the access credentials, because he never once thought I would be anything except his wife." The room was quiet. "Can you be there by Thursday morning?" Dominic asked. "I can be there tonight," Clara said. Roman drove her. He was not a man who made conversation, and Clara was not in a mood for it, so they rode in silence through the early afternoon streets, while Clara looked out the window and let herself feel, for the first time all day, the full size of what she was inside. "You're not afraid," Roman said. "Not a question." "I'm terrified," Clara said. "You don't look it." "I've had practice looking fine while everything falls apart." She watched the city move past the glass. 9 years of practice. Roman was quiet for a moment. "The boss doesn't bring people in like this," he said. "I know. He's careful about who he trusts, I'm aware." "I'm not saying this to warn you," Roman said. "I'm saying it because what happened today, him bringing you inside, telling you what he told you, giving you access to those documents, that doesn't happen." Clara looked at him. "Why are you telling me this?" Roman kept his eyes on the road. "Because the last person he trusted completely put 12 years of loyalty in one side of the scale," he said, "and money in the other." A pause, and money won, he said. Clara understood what Roman was doing. He was not threatening her. He was not warming her. He was telling her the truth in the plain, unadorned way of someone who had watched someone he cared about be hurt and was not willing to watch it happen again. "I'm not here for money," she said. "I know," Roman said. "That's the part that worries me." Whitfield Financial Group was on the 14th floor of a building she had been in hundreds of times. She knew the security code. She knew the after-hours entry protocol. She knew which hallway camera had been broken since April, because she had been the one to report it twice, and Marcus had never gotten around to fixing it. She walked in at 4:30 in the afternoon like she still belonged there, because she had decided, somewhere in Roman's car, that belonging was not something anyone had actually taken from her. She had given it away, piece by piece, for 9 years. She was taking it back. She went to her old desk. Still her desk, nobody had cleared it. Nobody had thought to, because nobody had known that what happened yesterday in a lawyer's office was also the end of her professional existence here. To the 14 people still working at their desks, she was simply back early from lunch. She logged in. Her credentials still worked. She felt something cold and clarifying move through her at that. "He didn't revoke my access, not because he forgot, because he assumed she wouldn't dare, because in 9 years she had never done anything without his implicit approval." She opened the transfer architecture. She had 44 hours until Thursday. She needed 12. She put her head down and went to work. She found it at 7:18 in the evening. Not the transfer itself, the pathway. The specific sequence of automated authorizations that would trigger the release and route it through 3 accounts before anyone at Voss Industries could intercept it. It was elegant. She could see Vincent Hale's precision in the structure. And she could see Peter Crane's, more erratic on contributions, the places where the system had been patched hastily, where instructions overlapped, where someone had been afraid and overbuilt the redundancies. She photographed every screen. She sent everything to a number Dominic had given her. Then she found the failsafe, the one she had built herself 3 years ago during a compliance review Marcus had asked her to run. A backdoor checkpoint, her own design, that could freeze any transfer sequence for 72 hours while triggering an automatic audit flag. Marcus had never fully understood it. He had signed off on it because she explained it, and he trusted her professional judgment, and had not paid close enough attention to realize what she had built was essentially a pause button that only she knew how to press. She stared at it for a long time. Then she typed a message to Dominic's number. "I found a way to stop it, without them knowing it's been stopped. Give me a reason to pull the trigger," His reply came 40 seconds later. I'll give you 3. Dinner first. Clara looked at the message. She looked at the screen full of numbers she had spent 3 years building, and one evening threatening to dismantle. She typed back where. His reply came immediately. Somewhere they won't look for you. She logged out. She stood, and she walked out of Whitfield Financial for what she understood, with complete and uncomplicated certainty, was the last time. She did not look back, not because she wasn't sad, but because she was done treating the past like it had power over her direction. The restaurant was small and lit low, in a neighborhood nobody associated with Dominic Voss. He was already there when she arrived. No suit jacket again. Sleeves rolled to the forearm, a glass of water he hadn't touched. He stood when she walked in, not a performance of manners, just a reflex, and she found that detail unexpectedly disarming. She sat across from him. You found the pathway, he said. I found everything, she said, including a way to freeze it without alerting the trigger protocols. Roman told me. He also told me your access credentials were never revoked. Marcus thought I wouldn't have the nerve. He was wrong about several things, Dominic said. A waiter appeared. Clara ordered without looking at the menu, because she had not eaten since the cold coffee in the diner the night before, and her body had officially stopped pretending that didn't matter. When the waiter left, Dominic said, I want to make you a formal offer. Clara waited. You identified what my financial team couldn't. You accessed a system nobody else could have reached. You found a mechanism to stop a Thursday transfer that would have cost my organization significantly. He looked at her directly. I want to bring you in, officially, properly compensated. A role built around exactly what you've been doing unpaid for 9 years. Clara was quiet for a moment. And the recording, she asked, becomes part of the case we build against Hale and Crane, he said. You're a witness, not a target. Roman will make sure you're protected. And Marcus? That depends on what the investigation finds. She looked at him. I'm not asking for leniency, she said. I'm asking whether you'll let me be part of determining what happens to him. Dominic studied her face. You don't want revenge, he said. I want the truth, she said. I want to know whether he was willing or cornered. Not because it changes what he did, but because I spent 9 years believing I knew him, and I need to know how wrong I was. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then you'll be part of the investigation, he said. All of it? Clara nodded once. Then yes, she said. I accept the offer. The food arrived. They ate in the kind of silence that is not uncomfortable, the silence of two people who have already said the important things and don't need to fill the space with noise. Then Dominic said, without looking up from his plate, You said this morning that you forgot what it felt like to be chosen. Clara went still. That wasn't me, she said carefully. That was from the story I told you about why I came here. I know, he said. I'm choosing you now, professionally, clearly, with full understanding of what I'm asking. He looked up. I want you to understand that the choice is real. Clara looked at him. She had walked into this city yesterday morning with $43 and a life she didn't recognize. She had walked through a night that rewrote everything she thought she knew about the 9 years behind her. And she was sitting here now, at a low-lit table in a neighborhood nobody was watching, being told plainly, directly, without performance, that she was worth choosing. She did not trust it completely. She was not foolish enough to trust it completely. But she was wise enough to recognize that distrusting everything was also a way of staying broken. I understand, she said. Good, he said. He went back to his food. But across the table, something had shifted, quiet and stubborn, and not yet named. And in 36 hours, when Thursday arrived, Clara Whitfield would be the reason a transfer never moved. She didn't know yet what that would cost her. She didn't know yet what it would change. She only knew that for the first time, in longer than she could honestly remember, she was not afraid of the answer. 36 hours, that was what Clara had. She spent the first 12 of them back in the suite on the 28th floor, not sleeping, cross-referencing everything she had photographed at Whitfield Financial against the folder Dominic had shown her that morning. She built a timeline on paper, actual paper, because she did not trust any screen she hadn't personally secured, and spread it across the bed and the floor and the small table by the window, until the room looked like the inside of a mind trying to hold too many things at once, which was exactly what it was. By 3 in the morning, the timeline was complete, and it was worse than she had thought. The transfer on Thursday was not a single transaction. It was the final piece of a sequence that had been building for 14 months, a slow, deliberate architecture designed to look like ordinary business, until the last moment, at which point 6 separate transfers would initiate simultaneously from 6 different accounts, route through Whitfield Financial's transit layer, and arrive in an offshore structure that would become legally untouchable within 4 hours of completion. Vincent Hale had built the foundation, Peter Crane had built the roof, and Marcus had handed over the walls. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at what she had drawn. She thought about how long 14 months was. She thought about what she had been doing 14 months ago, a Tuesday in September. Probably some ordinary Tuesday where she had made coffee and reviewed contracts and possibly had dinner with Marcus at that Italian place on the corner he liked, where the owner knew his name and always brought a complimentary dessert. While somewhere across the city, 3 men had been building something that would eventually swallow her life whole. She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. Then she stood up, picked up her phone, and called the number Dominic had given her. He answered on the second ring. At 3 in the morning. She did not remark on this. "It's not 1 transfer," she said. "It's 6, simultaneous. The failsafe I found will only freeze 1 pathway." A pause. "How many pathways can you reach?" he asked. "From inside Whitfield's system?" "All 6. She looked at her timeline. "But I can't do it alone. If I'm running 6 freeze protocols simultaneously, someone needs to be monitoring the alert system in real time. The moment the first freeze triggers, whoever is watching the transfer remotely will know something is wrong. They'll try to manually override. How long would the override take? 3 minutes, maybe 4 if they panic. And if you have someone monitoring, we can block the override attempt and extend the freeze window to 72 hours, she said, which gives your legal team enough time to have every account frozen by court order." Dominic was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. "Be ready at 8, he said. "Roman will bring someone." "Who?" "Someone who's better with systems than people," he said, "which will make the 2 of you an effective pair." Clara almost smiled. "Dominic, yes. The sequence initiates at 10:15 Thursday morning," she said. "Not noon like your document said. Someone changed the time." Another silence. Longer this time. "When did you find that?" he asked. 11 minutes ago. They moved it up, he said. Not to her, to himself, working it out. "They know something's wrong," Clara said. "Not what? But they moved the trigger forward, which means they're nervous. Which means we have less time than we thought."
Yes.
"Get some sleep," said. "I'll sleep Friday," she said, and hung up. Roman arrived at 7:58 with a young man named Eli who looked approximately 26 years old, wore a sweatshirt with a university logo that was faded past identification, and carried a laptop bag that clearly weighed more than he did. He looked at Clara's paper timeline, spread across every surface, and said, with genuine admiration, "You did this by hand." "I don't trust screens I haven't secured," she said. "Smart." He set his bag down, also slightly terrifying. He looked at her. "Roman says you built the Whitfield transfer architecture from the ground up, including the failsafe checkpoints, especially those." Eli nodded slowly, with the expression of someone reassessing a situation entirely. "Okay," he said. "So you're not support. You're the operation." "Was that unclear?" Clara said. "It was understated," he said. "There's a difference." Roman looked between them. "Thursday morning, 10:15. Do the 2 of you need anything else from me, or can I go be useful somewhere?" "Coffee," Clara said. "Information," Eli said simultaneously. Roman looked at the ceiling briefly. "I'll get both," he said, and left. They worked through the morning with the focused, wordless efficiency of 2 people who had each spent years, being the only one in a room, who fully understood what they were doing, and had therefore stopped expecting to be matched. Eli built a monitoring architecture that would track all 6 transfer pathways simultaneously and flag any remote access attempt within 0.3 seconds. Clara mapped the exact sequence in which the freeze protocols would need to be triggered not simultaneously, as she had initially planned, but in a cascading order that would each mask the next, so that by the time the 6th pathway froze, the remote monitors would still be trying to understand what had happened to the first. It was elegant. It was the kind of solution that only worked if the person who had built the original system was the one taking it apart. At 11:30, Eli leaned back and said, "Can I ask you something?" "You're going to regardless," Clara said. "Fair. Why didn't you just take the recording to the FBI? You had enough. You could have walked away." Clara didn't look up from her work. Because walking away was what everyone expected me to do, she said. That's it? And because the FBI would have taken the recording, and I would have become a witness in a case I had no part in shaping. She looked at him. I spent 9 years having no part in shaping things that directly affected my life. I'm done with that. Eli looked at her for a moment. The boss doesn't bring people inside like this, he said. Roman told me. Roman says everything once and trusts people to hear it. I heard it, Clara said. I'm still here. Eli nodded slowly. Good, he said, and went back to his screen. At 1:15 in the afternoon, Marcus called again. Eli's monitoring system flagged it before her phone even fully registered the ring a trace, automatically, on the call origin. He's calling from inside Whitfield Financial, Eli said. He's at the office, Clara said. He's at the office and someone else is on the line, Eli said, watching his screen. Three-way call. The third number is the same burner that called you yesterday morning. Clara looked at the phone, she answered. Clara, Marcus's voice was different now. The warmth was gone. What was left was something she had never heard from him before, a tightness, a controlled urgency, the voice of a man who has just been told something that frightened him and is trying not to show it. Where are you? Why? I need to talk to you, in person. It's important. Everything you needed to say to me in person, you said 2 days ago, she said, with a lawyer present. This is different. What does different mean, Marcus? A pause. I need the access code, he said. Clara went completely still. What access code? You know what I'm talking about. His voice dropped. The compliance backdoor, the audit freeze protocol. Someone told me you built it into the system, and I need the code to deactivate it before tomorrow morning. Clara looked at Eli. Eli's face said everything. They know about the failsafe. Not how she planned to use it, not that she was already inside the system. But they knew it existed. Crane or Hale had done their own audit sometime in the last 48 hours and found the architecture of what she had built, and now they needed it gone before the transfer triggered. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Clara, his voice shifted again. Something that was meant to sound like the old Marcus, the reasonable Marcus, the one she had loved, the one who could always talk her around to his perspective, because she had always wanted to believe he was someone she could trust. I'm not trying to hurt you. I just need this one thing. After that, I'll stay completely out of your life. Whatever you need, any settlement you want. Just give me the code. Any settlement I want, she said slowly. Yes, you emptied our account, Marcus. I'll replace it, every cent. Clara, please. She looked at the paper timeline on the bed. 14 months of careful, deliberate construction. And here at the end of it, the man who had handed over the walls of that construction was offering her money to protect it. No, she said. Clara, no. Her voice was completely steady. And Marcus, the next time someone asks you to do something like this, think very carefully about who you're protecting and what they're capable of doing to you when you become a liability. Silence, the kind that contained recognition. What did you do? He said. She hung up. Eli was already tracing the third line. Burner went dead 30 seconds after you hung up, he said. Whoever it was doesn't want to be found right now. He looked at her. They're going to move the timeline again. I know. We need to call this in. Clara was already dialing Dominic. He answered on the first ring. They know about the failsafe, she said. Marcus called asking for the deactivation code. The third party on the line was the burner from yesterday. Dominic's voice was completely calm. Timeline? Moving again. Eli thinks they'll push it to tonight or early tomorrow morning. Before we can reposition, can you trigger the freeze protocols remotely? Without being inside Whitfield's physical system. She had thought about this possibility exactly once, at 2 in the morning, and dismissed it, because it required a level of external access that she hadn't been sure was possible. She looked at Eli. Eli was already looking at her. 40% chance, he said quietly. The system has an external audit access point. It was built for regulatory compliance reviews. If the credentials are still active, they are, Clara said. I kept them active specifically because Marcus never paid attention to compliance infrastructure. Then yes, Eli said, remotely, but we get one shot. The moment we touch the system from outside, every alarm they've built into the transfer sequence is going to fire. She relayed this to Dominic. How long do you need? He asked. She looked at Eli. 30 minutes, Eli said, if everything works. And if it doesn't, then we find out very quickly, he said. Clara told Dominic. Then start now, Dominic said. Roman is already moving on Hale. I need the transfer frozen before they can initiate a manual override. A pause. Clara, yes. Whatever happens in the next 30 minutes, you did everything right. She did not know exactly what to do with that. I'll do everything right for the next 30 minutes first, she said. Then we'll see. She heard something that might have been a breath of a laugh before the line went quiet. She put the phone down. She looked at Eli. 30 minutes, she said. Yep, he said. They started. The first 8 minutes were the longest of Clara's professional life. Eli built the external access bridge while Clara preloaded all 6 freeze protocols, sequenced and ready, each one masked by the layer beneath it the way she had designed that morning. Her hands moved with the automatic precision of someone executing a plan they have rehearsed until it no longer required conscious thought. But her mind was doing something else entirely. Her mind was in a diner, the night before last, overhearing something she wasn't supposed to hear. Her mind was in a lawyer's office 2 mornings ago, watching Marcus sign his name without looking up. Her mind was in the last 9 years, the dinners, the events, the photographs, the audit protocols built at 2 in the morning, because she had nothing else to build, the loyalty so thorough it had looked, from the outside, like she was the one, with everything. She had not had everything. She had had nothing, and nobody, not Marcus, not Crane, not Hale, not the voice on the burner phone, had thought to worry about the woman with nothing. That had been their mistake. I'm in, Eli said. Clara's hands were already moving. The sequence took 11 minutes and 40 seconds. Freeze 1 triggered without resistance, clean, silent, invisible. Freeze 2 triggered 4 seconds later, and she heard, distantly, the alert system beginning to process something it didn't understand. Freeze 3. 4. The alert system was responding now. She could see it in the architecture. A cascade of automatic checks, firing in sequence, looking for the source of an interruption that wasn't presenting a recognizable signature. Remote override attempt, Eli said. His voice was completely level. Coming from an IP that traces to a proxy server, they're trying to reach the transfer manually. Block it, Clara said. Blocking. His fingers moved. Blocked. They're trying a secondary route. There's no secondary route, Clara said. The audit access point is the only external path. If they want to override, they have to come from inside Whitfield's physical network. They're switching, Eli said. They're pulling someone into the building. How long? 15 minutes, maybe less. Freeze 5 triggered. The alert system was screaming now. In the silent language of automated protocols, firing in patterns they weren't designed for, flags and holds, and authentication requests cascading through a system that had been built 3 years ago by a woman nobody had thought to worry about. Last one, Clara said. She looked at the 6th pathway. This was the one she had not built. This was Hale's original foundation, the first breach, the first access, the oldest thread in the web. She had reverse-engineered its structure in the last 24 hours, but she had not built it, and she did not know it the way she knew the rest. Clara, Eli said, 12 minutes before they're physically inside. She looked at the screen. She found the vulnerability. Not in the architecture, in the authorization timestamp. Hale had used a clearance code with an expiration date he had manually overridden to extend. The override was buried 6 layers deep, but it was there, and it was the one thing in the entire system that had not been designed to withstand external pressure. Because Hale had assumed nobody would ever look that deep. He had not assumed that the person looking would be someone who had built the other 5 layers, and therefore understood exactly how deep the foundation ran. She triggered the 6th freeze, all 6 pathways locked. The transfer sequence collapsed. 72-hour hold, automatic audit flag, regulatory compliance notification, every protocol she had built, firing in exactly the order she had intended. Eli's screen went quiet. He let out a "done," he said. Clara sat back. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from the specific, overwhelming physical release of something that has been held very tightly for a very long time, finally being allowed to let go. "You okay?" Eli said. "Give me a minute," she said. He gave her the minute. Her phone rang at 10:41. "Dominic, Roman has Hale," he said. "Crane is in the building. The transfer is frozen." A pause. "The FBI received an anonymous package this morning containing documentation of the account structure, the transfer sequence, and the original recording." Clara went still. "You went to the FBI. I went to the FBI with something that didn't implicate my organization," he said. "The case they're building is against Hale and Crane specifically, using the records you identified. The offshore accounts are already flagged." "And Marcus?" Dominic was quiet for a moment. "He's being interviewed," he said. Voluntarily, he walked in an hour ago. Clara had not expected that. She had expected many things from Marcus: denial, deflection, the smooth professional reasonableness of a man who had always known how to reframe a situation in his favor. She had not expected voluntary. He walked in himself, she said. Yes, because he was cornered. Possibly, Dominic said. Or possibly because whoever called him last night from the burner once the transfer froze and the package arrived at the FBI made very clear that Marcus was the one with the most exposure and the least protection. They cut him loose, Clara said, the moment he became a liability. Yes, she thought about his voice on the phone. The tightness. The please. The any settlement you want. He had known even then. He had already been cut loose and hadn't been able to tell her, because telling her would have meant explaining everything. She did not feel sorry for him. She felt, strangely and without guilt, nothing at all. Dominic, she said, yes. Was he willing or cornered? The question she had asked Roman 24 hours ago. The question that had mattered to her more than the outcome. Dominic was quiet for a moment. Both, he said finally. He was cornered first, and then he was willing because being willing was easier than fighting. A pause. He is not a man who fights. Clara closed her eyes. Thought about 9 years with a man who did not fight. Who had chosen, when the pressure came, the path of least resistance. Who had signed papers and smiled warmly and said you'll be fine and let her walk out into a city she didn't know with $43 and nowhere to go. Thank you, she said, for finding out. You asked to know the truth, he said. That was the agreement. She nodded, even though he couldn't see it. Come back to the building, he said. There are things to discuss. Proper things, contracts, terms, a role that actually reflects what you spent the past 2 days doing. You're offering me a job again. I'm formalizing the one you already started, he said. Clara looked at the timeline on the bed. The paper one. Handwritten. The one she had made at 3 in the morning when she was trying to hold too many things in her head at once. I'll be there in an hour, she said. She hung up. She looked at Eli. Good work, she said. He grinned the real grin of someone who has just done something genuinely difficult and knows it. You too, he said, although I maintain that the hand-drawn timeline was slightly insane. It worked, she said. It absolutely worked, he agreed. She went back to the suite first. She showered, changed into clean clothes that still belonged to no particular version of herself she had previously defined. She stood at the window for 10 minutes watching the city and letting herself understand, slowly and in pieces, what the past 72 hours had actually been. She had lost a marriage. She had lost a home. She had lost 9 years of careful, invisible labor that had amounted, at the end, to nothing she could hold. And she had walked broke, furious, and completely without a plan into the building of one of the most powerful men in the city and started over. Not because she was brave, because she was stubborn, because she had built things, real things, functional things, things that mattered for 9 years without credit, and she was not willing to let that architecture be used to destroy something without her having anything to say about it. She had not planned any of what came after, but she had stayed, and that, she thought, was a different kind of courage. She picked up her key. She went downstairs. She crossed the 3 blocks to Voss Industries with her shoulders back and her pace steady, the way she had decided, somewhere in the last 2 days, that she was going to walk through things going forward, not because she wasn't afraid, but because she had proven to herself that afraid and capable were not mutually exclusive. The lobby security recognized her now. That was new. The elevator opened on the 32nd floor. Dominic was at his desk. He looked up when she walked in, and something in his expression shifted, small, controlled, but there. The way a thing shifts when something expected arrives and turns out to be more than expected. It's done, she said. I know, he said. Sit down. She sat. He pushed a folder across the desk. She opened it. The title on the first page read, Director of Financial Intelligence, Voss Industries. She looked at the number on the 3rd line. She looked up. That's not a starting salary, she said. No, he agreed. It's a correction. For what? For 9 years of unpaid expertise, he said simply. The number accounts for what the market rate should have been and what it is now. He looked at her steadily. I don't underpay people. Clara looked at the folder. She thought about $43. She thought about cold coffee in a diner 3 nights ago. She thought about the voice on the phone, go back to your life, spoken with such confidence, such certainty, that the woman who had walked out of that diner with a 4% phone battery and a recording she didn't understand would quietly return to wherever women like her went when they were no longer useful. She thought about the fact that nobody, not Marcus, not Crane, not Hale, not the burner phone voice, had considered for 1 second that she might not go back, that she might go somewhere they had never anticipated, that she might build something new in a place they never thought to look, with tools they had spent years watching her use without ever understanding what she was truly capable of. "I have conditions," she said. "I expected you would. I run my department completely independently. No interference with methodology." Agreed. Full access to any documentation relevant to financial compliance across all subsidiaries. Agreed. And I want to be part of whatever happens with Hale and Crane's case. Not as a witness, as an analyst. Dominic looked at her for a long moment. "That's a more complicated ask," he said. "I know," she said. "I'm asking anyway." He was quiet, not calculating, not resistant. "Agreed," he said. Clara looked at the folder. She picked up the pen he had left at the edge of the desk. She signed on the marked line. She set the pen down. "Good," Dominic said. And then so quickly it was almost imperceptible, but she caught it, because she had spent 2 days learning to read the small changes in a face, trained to reveal nothing. He allowed himself the briefest, most genuine expression of relief she had seen from him. It was not happiness exactly. It was the specific, quiet expression of a man who has been let down enough times to have stopped fully expecting otherwise, catching himself being surprised by someone who didn't. She understood that expression completely. She had seen it every morning for 9 years in the mirror, without knowing what it was called. She knew now. It was called waiting for the other shoe to drop so long that you forget shoes don't always drop. "Monday morning," Dominic said. 8 o'clock. "Roman will brief you on the current open files." "Monday," she said. "I'll be here at 7:50. She stood. She picked up her copy of the signed folder. She walked to the door. "Clara," he said. She stopped, turned. "You asked me 2 nights ago why I was doing this," he said. "When you first came to this office." "Yes. I told you it was because you brought the recording to me, instead of using it against me." "Yes." He looked at her across the room. "That was true," he said. "But it was not the whole truth." Clara waited. "The whole truth," he said, "is that you sat across this desk with $43 and nowhere to go, and you negotiated." He said it like it meant something large, like it was the kind of thing that did not happen often enough to be unremarkable. "You didn't beg, you didn't collapse, you assessed the situation and you made a deal." He paused. "I've dealt with a great many people in my life. Very few of them understood that the only real currency in any room is the willingness to be honest about what you need and clear about what you offer." Clara was quiet for a moment. $43 focuses the mind," she said. Something crossed his face. That almost expression. The one that was not quite a smile, but lived in the same neighborhood. "Monday," he said. "Monday," she said. She walked out. The elevator doors closed behind her. And Clara Whitfield, who had come into this city 72 hours ago with nothing, who had been told to go back to a life that no longer existed, who had spent 48 hours dismantling the careful architecture of her own betrayal, with nothing but a paper timeline and the institutional knowledge of a woman who had been underestimated once too often, stood in the elevator and let herself feel fully and without apology the exact size of what had just changed. It was enormous. It was terrifying. It was hers. The elevator opened on the lobby. She walked out into the city, and she did not look back. Monday arrived the way all significant days arrive, looking exactly like an ordinary one. Clara was at the Voss Industries lobby at 7:48, 2 minutes early of her own stated arrival. She had spent the weekend doing 3 things: finding a short-term furnished apartment 2 miles from the office, buying clothes that belonged to no previous version of herself, and sleeping for a combined total of 19 hours across 2 days, because her body had finally presented the bill for 72 hours of sustained crisis, and she had no choice but to pay it. She had not thought about Marcus. That was not entirely true. She had thought about him the way you think about a storm, after it's passed, aware of the damage, no longer afraid of the lightning. He had given his voluntary statement to the FBI. His attorney had contacted her attorney she had hired one Saturday morning, efficiently and without ceremony, regarding the financial settlement. The emptied account would be restored, the marital assets divided properly. Everything that should have been done without drama, done now with the urgency of a man trying to minimize exposure. She had signed what needed signing and returned her attention to what was ahead. Roman met her in the lobby at 7:55. He handed her a keycard without preamble. 31st floor, he said. Your office is the one at the end of the hall. It was a storage room last week. Eli spent the weekend converting it. Eli did? He volunteered. He said, and I'm quoting directly, that anyone who builds a compliance failsafe that's subtle deserves a window. Clara looked at the keycard. Does it have a window? 2, Roman said. He was thorough. They rode the elevator in the comfortable silence she had already come to recognize as Roman's default mode of existing, not unfriendly. Simply someone who had learned that most words were optional. Hale, she asked. In federal custody as of Saturday afternoon. Crane, arrested Sunday morning. His attorney is already negotiating. Marcus, cooperating fully, Roman said. His testimony implicates both of them specifically on the data-gathering operation against Voss Industries. He has provided documentation going back 8 months. They'll reduce his charges, Clara said, likely. She absorbed this without expression. Roman looked at her sideways. Does that bother you? He asked. No, she said, and meant it. What he did to me was personal. What they're charging him with is federal. Those are 2 different scales of justice, and I don't need them to be the same thing. Roman nodded once. The boss said you'd say something like that, he said. What did he say exactly? He said you were pragmatic. A pause that held something that might have been warmth. He meant it as the highest compliment he knows how to give. The elevator opened. The office had 2 windows. Eli had also, apparently, acquired a desk that was large enough for the kind of work she actually did, wide surface, clean lines, with a monitor setup that was frankly better than anything she had used at Whitfield Financial. There was a second chair already positioned at an angle that suggested it had been placed there specifically for collaborative work, not as an afterthought. She stood in the doorway for a moment. She thought about the desk she had sat at for 9 years in her husband's company, in the corner near the supply closet, because nobody had thought to give her a proper office, because nobody had thought to consider her a proper employee. She walked in. She set her bag down. She sat in her chair. She opened her laptop. She got to work. At 9:15, Dominic appeared in the doorway. He did not knock. He also did not simply walk in. He stopped at the threshold in a way that she was coming to understand. His version of asking permission, the slight pause, the direct look, the waiting. Come in, she said. He came in, sat in the second chair with the ease of someone for whom sitting in other people's offices was a normal activity rather than a concession. Roman briefed you, he said. Yes. Hale Crane Marcus. I know the current status. There's a development, he said. From this morning, Clara looked up from the screen. His voice had gone to that particular quietness she now recognized as a signal. Crane's attorney made contact at 8 o'clock, he said. Crane is willing to give full testimony in exchange for reduced sentencing. Name every party involved. Document every transaction, he paused, including transactions that predate Hale's involvement by approximately 2 years. 2 years before Hale, Clara said. Yes, which means Crane was operating independently before he brought Hale in. Which means what we found was not the beginning, Dominic said. It was the middle. The weight of that settled between them. How far back does it go, she asked. We don't know yet, he said. Crane's attorney is being strategic about the sequencing of disclosure. He wants guarantees in place before he reveals the full scope. And the full scope is larger than what we found. Significantly larger, Dominic said. That's what his attorney implied. Clara turned back to her screen. She pulled up the financial architecture she had been mapping all morning, the same data, now properly housed in Voss Industries' system, rather than spread across a bed in paper form, and she looked at it with new eyes. The offshore holding structure, she said, the one the Thursday transfer was routing toward. Yes, it wasn't the destination, she said. It was a waypoint. Dominic was very still. What makes you say that? The account structure, she said, turning the screen toward him. Look at the layer configuration. 3 shells, then a transit account, then 3 more shells. Legitimate final destinations don't need this architecture. This is designed to move money through, not to hold it. She tapped the screen. This is a pipeline, and we froze it in the middle, which means we stopped one flow. We did not find the source, and we did not find where it was ultimately going. Dominic looked at the screen for a long moment. You determined this morning, he said. In the last 40 minutes, she said, before I came in. I was about to call you. He looked at her with an expression that had layers she was only beginning to understand how to read. "Clara," he said, "yes, what you just described changes the scale of this investigation substantially. I know. It also means the people who built the source end of this pipeline do not yet know their pipeline has been interrupted," he said. "Which means we have a window. A small one," she said. "Once Crane starts talking, they'll know." "How small?" "Days," she said. "Maybe less. Crane's attorney is negotiating now. The moment a deal is reached, disclosure begins and someone at the source end will be notified within hours." Dominic stood. He walked to the window one of the two Eli had arranged, and stood there in a way she recognized from the first night when he had turned from the window with the look of a man recalculating something fundamental. "I need to make calls," he said. "I need 2 more hours with these accounts," she said. "You'll have them." He turned. "Don't share what you've found with anyone outside this office until I've made contact with the federal team." "Understood." He moved to the door. "Dominic," he stopped. "The source end," she said. "Do you have a suspicion about who it is?" A pause that was longer than his usual 4 seconds. "A suspicion," he said. "Not a certainty, but someone you know." He looked at her steadily. "In my world," he said, "it is almost always someone you know." He left. Clara turned back to her screen. And the quiet of her new office with its 2 windows, and its properly sized desk, and its second chair positioned at exactly the right angle, filled with the particular focused silence of someone who has just understood that what they thought was the end of a story is actually the end of the first chapter. She found the source at 11:47. Not through the accounts, through the authorization chain. A sequence of access permissions buried so deep in the subsidiary structure that it would have taken a standard audit 18 months to reach it. Clara reached it in 2 hours because she was not running a standard audit. She was running the audit of someone who had spent the last 72 hours learning exactly how these particular accounts had been built, and who had therefore developed an intuition for where the builders liked to hide things. The authorization chain terminated in a name. She stared at it. She read it twice. Then she picked up her phone and called Dominic. He answered immediately. "I found the source," she said. "Who?" she told him. The silence that followed was the longest she had heard from him. Longer than 4 seconds, longer than 10. "Say it again," he said. She said it again. She heard him breathe, just once. Controlled. The sound of a man absorbing something that requires physical management. "Are you certain?" he said. "The authorization chain doesn't lie," she said. "I can show you every layer. It terminates clearly. There is no ambiguity. Where are you, my office?" "Don't move," he said. He was there in 4 minutes. He walked in, closed the door, and stood in front of her screen, with his hands behind his back, and looked at what she had found with the expression of a man identifying something he had hoped he would not find. She watched him. She had seen him receive difficult information before Hale's name, Crane's name, the discovery that the betrayal went deeper than he had initially understood. Each time, his face had done the same thing, a brief, unguarded tightening, and then the controlled professional stillness, returning like a curtain dropping. This time, the stillness took longer to return. This time, something behind his eyes stayed unsettled in a way she had not seen before. "His name is Arthur Voss," Dominic said finally. Clara did not react visibly, but she understood immediately. "Your father," she said. "My father," he said. The story came out in pieces, the way stories do when the person telling them is simultaneously deciding how much to tell and working through the telling in real time. Arthur Voss had built the family operation from the ground up, had been, by all accounts, brilliant and ruthless, and extraordinarily effective for 3 decades before handing formal control to Dominic 8 years ago. The handover had been presented as retirement, as the natural order of succession. What it had actually been, Clara now understood from the authorization chain in front of her, was a repositioning. Arthur had not stepped back, he had stepped sideways, out of the visible structure, into the infrastructure beneath it. For 8 years, while Dominic ran the organization his father had built, Arthur had been quietly constructing a parallel one, using Dominic's operations as a transit layer, using people inside Dominic's trust Crane, who had served Arthur before he ever served Dominic Hale, recruited 2 years ago as the technical architect to siphon, reroute, and accumulate. Not against Dominic specifically, not with malice toward his son, with the particular arrogance of a man who simply could not accept that the organization he built was no longer his to control, and who had therefore decided, without ever asking that it still was. He used your own structure against you, Clara said. He built the structure, Dominic said. He believed that gave him permanent claim. Did you know, even partially? Dominic looked at her. No, he said. And the word was not defensive. It was simply honest with the specific weight of honesty that has cost something to arrive at. When did you last speak to him? 2 weeks ago, a dinner. He asked about the Eastern Division's quarterly performance. Dominic paused. He knew about the transfer. He was asking about it without asking about it. Checking his timeline, and you didn't know. I thought he was being a retired man who missed the work. Something moved across his face. I thought he was lonely. Clara was quiet for a moment. She thought about 9 years with someone whose real motivations she had not seen. She thought about how much easier it is to assign benign explanations to the people we love, how much less painful than the alternative. What are you going to do? She asked. Dominic looked at her screen, at his father's name at the bottom of an authorization chain built from dishonesty. What I would do for anyone else, he said. Which means I call the federal team, provide the documentation, and cooperate fully with whatever investigation follows. Even though it's your father. Especially because it's my father, he said. Because if I make an exception here, I become someone who has exceptions. And the moment you have exceptions, you have a price. He looked at her directly. I've spent 15 years making sure I don't have a price. Clara held his gaze. That will cost you, she said. Yes, more than Hale cost you, more than Crane. Yes. Are you all right? He looked at her. The question seemed to reach him differently than he expected, not as a professional courtesy or a social reflex, but as a genuine inquiry from someone who was paying attention. No, he said, like she had said in his office, the very first morning. No, but I'll finish what I started. He recognized it. She could see him recognize it. But you'll make the call, she said. Yes. Then I'll have the complete documentation ready in 20 minutes, she said. Every layer, every authorization, a chain of evidence that doesn't require interpretation. Clara, you said I don't need to ask before I start working, she said. Those were your terms. Something crossed his face. The almost expression, closer to a smile than she had seen it yet. 20 minutes, he said. 18 if you stop talking, she said. He stood, walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. For what it's worth, he said, without turning around. Yes, the thing I said, about not having exceptions. A pause. It's easier to hold to when someone else is holding to the same thing. He left before she could respond. She looked at the closed door for exactly 3 seconds. Then she turned back to her screen and started building the cleanest, most complete chain of financial evidence she had ever constructed in her professional life. The federal team arrived at 2 in the afternoon. 3 agents, 2 attorneys, a forensic accountant, took one look at Clara's documentation and asked, with genuine professional admiration, how long it had taken her to map the authorization chain. About 2 hours, Clara said. The forensic accountant looked at her supervisor. We've been trying to find the source of the Voss Industries anomaly for 6 weeks, he said. Clara said nothing. He looked back at her. Would you be available for a consulting engagement? He asked. She's employed, Dominic said from across the room, without looking up. I'm employed, Clara confirmed. The interview with Dominic lasted 3 hours. Clara was not present for it. She remained in her office, completing the supporting documentation the federal team had requested, and she did not think too hard about what it cost a man to sit in a room and systematically provide evidence against his own father. She knew what it cost, not from experience with fathers, from experience with the specific, gutting work of being honest about someone you loved when honesty served them poorly. She knew what it was to sit with the full truth of a betrayal and choose accuracy over comfort. She had done it in the last 72 hours more times than she could count. At 5:15, the federal team left. At 5:22, Roman appeared in her doorway. He's in his office, Roman said. He won't say he wants company. But he's been standing at the window for 20 minutes, and he hasn't made a single call, which means he's not working. Clara looked at Roman. You're asking me to go check on him, she said. I'm reporting the observable facts, Roman said, and allowing you to draw your own conclusions. He left. Clara saved her work. She went up 1 floor. Dominic was at the window. She knocked on the open door. He turned. The documentation is complete, she said. The federal team acknowledged receipt. Thank you. She did not leave. He looked at her. You don't have to be here, he said. I know, she said. Roman reported observable facts and I drew my own conclusions. Something moved in his expression. He shouldn't have done that, he said. He cares about you, she said. He's bad at saying it, so he does it sideways. She looked at him steadily. I understand that approach. Dominic turned back to the window. He built everything I have, he said. Not just the money. The structure. The understanding of how to move through a world like this without being consumed by it. Every instinct I trust, I learned from watching him. A pause. And he's been operating against me for 8 years. Clara stood in the room and did not try to soften this. Because she understood that what he needed was not softening. It doesn't erase what he taught you, she said. Doesn't it? No, she said. The things you learned are true regardless of who taught them. The method doesn't corrupt the knowledge. She paused. Marcus taught me to second-guess my own competence for 9 years. But I built the failsafe that stopped Thursday's transfer. The competence was always real, even if the person who should have recognized it didn't. Dominic was quiet for a long time. That's a generous way to look at it, he said. It's an accurate way, she said. There's a difference. He turned from the window. He looked at her with the direct, unguarded attention that she had come to recognize as the version of him that existed beneath the controlled professional surface, the version that didn't perform certainty, that allowed itself to be uncertain without treating uncertainty as a weakness. You've been here 4 days, he said. 3.5, she corrected. You've dismantled a 14-month financial conspiracy, identified a source that 6 weeks of federal investigation missed, and are standing in my office at 5:30 on a Monday, telling me that the things my father taught me are still worth keeping. Is any of that inaccurate, she said. No, he said. Then, what's the point you're making? He looked at her. The point, he said slowly, is that I don't know what to do with you. Clara blinked. Excuse me? He stopped. He looked, for the first time in 4 days of knowing him, genuinely uncertain about his own words. I mean that I have protocols for most situations. I know how to categorize people, what they want, what they offer, how to structure the relationship accordingly. He paused. You don't categorize. Should I apologize for that? She said. No, he said. I'm not complaining. What are you doing? He was quiet for a moment. Admitting something, he said. Clara looked at him. The city was going gold and dark outside the window behind him. What are you admitting? She said. He met her eyes. That I was not prepared for you, he said. The words landed quietly, without drama, in the way true things tend to land when the person saying them has already decided that honesty is more important than protection. Clara held very still. She thought about the woman who had walked into this building 4 days ago, who had been so thoroughly dismissed, so completely erased from consideration, that nobody had thought to wonder what she might do if you handed her a reason to do something. She thought about how wrong everyone had been. She thought about how wrong she had been about herself. I wasn't prepared for me either, she said. Something broke open in his expression, not painfully, not dramatically, but the way a window opens, a shift, a release, and then suddenly, the air in the room is different. He exhaled. Stay, he said, not in the building. Not professionally. He paused, and seemed to recognize that he was handling this with the precision of someone who has not practiced saying this particular kind of thing. Have dinner with me. You're asking me to dinner, she said. Yes, not as a professional courtesy, no, and not because you need my expertise on anything. Correct, just dinner, she said. Just dinner, he confirmed. Clara looked at him. She thought about everything she had promised herself in the last 4 days about trust, and moving carefully, and not confusing gratitude for something it wasn't. She also thought about the fact that Dominic Voss had not, in 4 days and under considerable pressure, been anything other than exactly what he appeared to be, which was, in her current experience, extraordinary. Yes, she said. They went back to the small restaurant in the neighborhood, nobody associated with Dominic Voss. The same table, the same low light, but a completely different conversation. They did not talk about the case. They did not talk about Arthur Voss or Marcus Whitfield or the federal investigation or the Thursday transfer that had been frozen in the middle of a pipeline that ran deeper than either of them had initially understood. They talked about the things that people talk about when they are two people who have spent several days discovering that the other one is more than they expected and are now sitting across a table deciding what to do about it. He told her that he had not taken a real vacation in 6 years because he did not know how to be in a place where he was not useful. She told him she understood this more than she wished she did. He asked her where she had grown up. She told him. She asked what he had wanted to be before the organization became his life. He was quiet for a moment. A historian, he said. She laughed genuinely, the way she laughed when something surprised her into it. A historian, she repeated. I was interested in how empires fell, he said. What they had in common. What the people inside them understood in the last moment, before the structure collapsed. And now you run one, she said. And now I run one, he said. Has the historical perspective been useful? More than I expected, he said. Empires fall when the people at the center start believing the structure is more important than the people inside it. Clara looked at him. Is that a warning? She said. It's an observation, he said. One I try to remember. Do you succeed? Not always, he said honestly. But I try more than I used to. The food was good. The conversation was better. And when they walked out into the cool evening air afterward, and he turned to her on the sidewalk with the city moving around them, she understood that the question he was about to ask was not about work. Can I see you again? He said, outside of the office. Outside of any professional context, Clara looked at him. You already know I'm going to say yes, she said. I know nothing of the sort, he said. I hope. That's different. She looked at him for a moment. This man who held his power without flourish, who had sat in a room for 3 hours providing evidence against his own father, because his integrity mattered more than his comfort, who had told her, plainly, that he was not prepared for her, in a tone of voice that made it clear he did not consider that a problem. Yes, she said, you can see me again. He nodded once. The way he nodded when something significant was agreed upon. Thursday, he said, assuming no one attempts another financial conspiracy. I'll keep the failsafe armed, she said. He almost smiled. She turned to go. He said, Clara. She turned back. He looked at her in the way she was becoming familiar with, direct, unhurried, saying the thing rather than the dressed-up version of the thing. 4 days ago, he said, you walked into my building with $43, and the most useful piece of intelligence my organization has received in 8 years. Yes, she said. I want you to understand that neither of those things is why I'm standing here. She held his gaze. I know, she said. She walked away into the city. And for the first time in longer than she could precisely remember, she walked without the low, constant hum of someone braced for the next loss. She walked the way a person walks when they understand, in their bones, that what is ahead of them is not a continuation of what was behind. It was something new. It was something that had no name yet, because it had not finished becoming itself. And Clara Whitfield, who had walked out of a lawyer's office with nothing and walked into the rest of her life, decided, on a cool evening on a city street, that nameless and new was exactly where she wanted to be.